I should have known the moment they walked in. The restaurant had been buzzing with its usual Saturday night chaos, clinking glasses, laughter bouncing off exposed brick walls, the kitchen staff shouting orders in Italian that made the tourists smile. I'd been weaving between tables for 6 hours straight, my feet screaming in protest, my apron stained with marinara and red wine. Just another shift at Tesoro, just another night pretending I belonged in the background of other people's lives. But when the doors opened and they entered, the air changed. It wasn't dramatic at first. No record scratch, no sudden silence. Just a subtle shift, like the temperature dropping a single degree, the kind of cold that crawls up your spine before your brain registers the danger. I was balancing 3 plates of ossobuco when I felt it, that primal instinct that makes prey animals freeze in open fields. I looked up. 6 men in tailored suits that probably cost more than my yearly rent. They moved, like wolves synchronized, aware, lethal. The hostess, Maria, had gone pale, her hands trembling as she grabbed menus she didn't need to grab. She knew something I didn't, and then I saw him. He walked at the center of the pack, and God, the way he carried himself like gravity bent differently around him. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from Carrara marble. Sharp jawline, darker eyes that seemed to see through walls, through skin, through every lie you'd ever told yourself. He wore a black suit with no tie, the top button of his white shirt undone, revealing a column of throat that somehow felt more intimate than it should. He looked like money, like power, like the kind of man who'd never heard the word no and wouldn't recognize it if he did. I should have looked away. I didn't. His gaze swept the restaurant with casual dominance, assessing, cataloging, and then it landed on me. Just for a second. One heartbeat where those dark eyes locked onto mine, and I felt it like a physical touch. Something flickered across his face, curiosity, recognition, before one of his men said something low and urgent, and the moment shattered. They were seated at the best table. Of course they were. Corner booth, leather upholstery, perfect sightlines to both exits, the kind of table we kept reserved for people who didn't make reservations because they didn't have to. Sasha. My manager, Tony, appeared at my elbow, his usual swagger replaced by something twitchy and nervous. Table 12. You're taking it. My stomach dropped. Tony, I've got 6 tables already. You're taking it. His voice had gone flat, dead. The voice of a man following orders he didn't want to follow. And Sasha, don't fuck this up. He walked away before I could argue. I stood there for 3 seconds, my hands still gripping empty plates, my mind racing. Every instinct I had screamed at me to refuse, to find an excuse, to send literally anyone else. But I needed this job, needed the money, needed the routine, needed the illusion that I was building something stable after everything had fallen apart. So I smoothed my apron, tucked a strand of dark hair behind my ear, and walked toward the corner booth. They were laughing when I approached, the kind of laughter that felt like a weapon, sharp and excluding. One of them, a younger guy with slicked back blonde hair and a smile that made my skin crawl, was doing an impression of someone I couldn't see. The others roared, fists pounding the table. Except him, the man in the center. He sat perfectly still, one arm draped across the back of the booth, his expression unreadable. He wasn't laughing. He was watching. Good evening, gentlemen. My voice came out steadier than I felt. Can I start you off with drinks? The blonde one looked up at me, his eyes trailing over my body with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. Well, what do we have here? Your server, I said flatly. Drinks? Feisty. He grinned at his companions. I like feisty. Hey, sweetheart, you got a name? Or should I just call you sweetheart? I'd prefer you call me when you're ready to order. I kept my expression neutral, my pen poised over my notepad. I'd dealt with entitled assholes before. This was nothing new, except the energy at the table shifted. The laughter died. One of the older men, salt and pepper hair, scar across his knuckles, leaned forward. You know who you're talking to, girl? A customer who hasn't ordered yet. Someone sucked in a breath. The blonde one's smile turned mean. Listen, waitress. Enough. The word cut through the tension like a blade. Not loud, not aggressive, just absolute. Everyone at the table went silent. I looked at him, the man in the center, and found him staring directly at me. His expression hadn't changed, but something in his eyes had sharpened, focused, like a predator deciding whether I was prey or something more. Interesting. She's doing her job, he said quietly. Let her do it. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a command, delivered in a voice that made kingdoms fall. The blonde one slouched back in his seat, jaw tight, but he didn't argue. Nobody argued. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt exposed, like I'd been stripped bare and examined under harsh light. His gaze stayed on me for another beat long enough that I felt my pulse in my throat before he finally spoke. Whiskey. Neat. The others will have the same. Of course. I wrote it down, my handwriting shakier than I wanted. I'll be right back with those. I turned to leave, desperate to escape the weight of his attention. Wait. I froze. Turned back slowly. He tilted his head slightly, studying me with an intensity that made my breath catch. Have we met before? No. The word came out too fast, too defensive. His lips curved, not quite a smile, but something darker, more knowing. Strange. I never forget a face. Before I could respond, before I could think, the lights in the restaurant flickered once, twice, then went completely dark. Screams erupted, glass shattered, and in the chaos, in the pitch black, I felt a hand strong, warm, unmistakably deliberate, wrap around my wrist and pull me down just as something whistled through the air where my head had been. A voice, low and deadly calm, whispered against my ear. Stay down. Don't move. Don't make a sound. And I realized, with creeping horror, that the hand holding me belonged to him. The darkness felt alive. I couldn't see anything. Not the tables, not the walls, not even my own hand pressed against the cold floor. But I could feel everything. The rapid thunder of my heartbeat, the solid warmth of his body sheltering mine, the controlled rhythm of his breathing, steady and unhurried, like blackouts and chaos were just another Tuesday for him. Around us, panic bloomed. Chairs scraped, voices shouted in confusion and fear. Someone was crying. The emergency exit sign glowed weakly in the distance, casting everything in sickly green shadow. Stay exactly where you are, he murmured, his mouth so close to my ear that I felt the words more than heard them. His hand still gripped my wrist, firm but not painful. Protective, maybe. Or possessive. With him I couldn't tell the difference. What's happening? I whispered back. Nothing that concerns you. Yet. The word hung between us like a promise and a threat. Footsteps approached heavy, purposeful. I tensed, but his hand tightened on my wrist in warning. Through the dim emergency lighting, I saw shapes moving near the entrance. 3 figures, maybe 4, dressed in black. One of them carried something long and angular. A gun. My breath caught. This wasn't a power outage. This was an attack. Boss. The voice came from somewhere above us, one of his men, crouched near the booth. East exit is clear. We can move. Not yet. His response was barely audible, but it carried. Absolute authority. Let them show their hand. I wanted to scream at him. Let them show their hand? People could die. I could die. But something in his tone, in the coiled tension of his body, told me he knew exactly what he was doing. This was a chess game, and he was already 3 moves ahead. One of the figures moved closer, close enough that I could see the tactical vest, the communication device blinking at his collar. Not random thieves, not amateurs, professionals. Severino. The shout came from near the kitchen, rough and accented. We know you're here. Come out, and maybe the civilians walk away. Severino. The name detonated in my mind like a grenade. Severino. As in the Severino family. As in one of the most powerful and ruthless crime syndicates on the East Coast. As in the people whose names you didn't say out loud unless you wanted to disappear. Holy God. I was crouched on a restaurant floor, protected by a Mafia boss, while armed men hunted him like prey. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be my life. How many? Severino asked quietly, his lips still near my ear. 4 visible. Another voice responded from the darkness. Probably 6 total. Russo family, based on the formation. Ambitious. Severino's tone suggested he found this more amusing than concerning. Carlo always did overestimate himself. The lights came back on. It happened fast, a sudden flood of brightness that made everyone flinch. In that split second of disorientation, Severino moved. One moment he was beside me. The next he was on his feet, gun in hand, firing twice with surgical precision. Two of the attackers went down before they could even raise their weapons. Chaos exploded. Tables flipped. Gunfire cracked through the air. Severino's men moved like they'd rehearsed this 1,000 times, efficient, brutal, coordinated. I pressed myself against the floor. Hands over my head, ears ringing, heart trying to pound its way out of my chest. Someone grabbed my arm. I screamed, thrashing, until I heard a familiar voice. "It's me! It's Tony!" My manager hauled me toward the kitchen, his face sheet white, his hands shaking. Around us, civilians were running, diving, hiding. A woman in a red dress was sobbing hysterically. An older man was bleeding from a cut on his forehead. "Go, go, go." Tony shoved me through the kitchen doors. "Out the back. Don't stop." But I did stop. I turned, just for a second, and looked back. Severino stood in the center of the restaurant like a dark angel of death. Blood spattered his white shirt. His expression was perfectly calm, almost bored, as he shot a man trying to flank him. One of the attackers lunged at him with a knife. Severino caught his wrist, twisted, and the sickening crack of breaking bone echoed even over the gunfire. He was terrifying, magnificent, absolutely in control, and then his eyes found mine across the chaos. Time stopped. In the middle of violence and death, in the middle of everything falling apart, he looked at me with an intensity that stole my breath. Not angry, not dismissive. Something else. Something I couldn't name but felt down to my bones. "Sasha." Tony yanked me backward. "Move." I stumbled into the kitchen, the doors swinging shut behind me, cutting off the view, cutting off whatever that moment had been. The alley was cold and dark and smelled like garbage. Tony pushed me toward the street, toward the wail of approaching sirens, toward safety. But my legs felt like water. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. My mind kept replaying those eyes, dark, intense, seeing something in me I didn't understand. Miss Vale. I spun around. One of Severino's men stood at the alley entrance, the older one with the scarred knuckles. He held out a business card, pristine white despite the violence we'd just survived. "Mr. Severino requests your presence tomorrow evening, 8 o'clock. He pressed the card into my hand before I could refuse. He doesn't like being refused. Then, he was gone, melting back into the shadows like he'd never existed. I looked down at the card. Heavy stock, embossed lettering. An address in the most expensive part of the city. No name, no explanation. Just a location and a time. Tony stared at me, his expression somewhere between terror and pity. "Sasha, what the hell did you get yourself into?" I didn't have an answer. I just knew, standing in that filthy alley with blood on my shoes and a Mafia boss's summons in my hand, that my life had just been split into before and after, and there was no going back. I didn't sleep. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw gunfire and blood, and those impossibly dark eyes watching me like I was a puzzle he intended to solve. I lay in my shoebox apartment, staring at the water-stained ceiling, the business card on my nightstand glowing like radioactive material in the darkness. "Mr. Severino requests your presence." Requests. Like I had a choice. Like this was an invitation to brunch and not a summons from a man who killed people as casually as other men ordered coffee. I should have torn up the card. Should have called the police. Should have packed a bag and run as far as my savings account would carry me, which, given my current financial situation, was approximately nowhere. Instead, I picked up my phone and did what any rational person would do when their life imploded. I Googled him. Dante Severino, age 34, CEO of Severino Enterprises. The official story was almost boring. Real estate development, import-export businesses, charitable foundations. A dozen legitimate companies that generated billions in revenue. He looked different in the press photos, polished, corporate, almost respectable in $1,000 suits with his hair perfectly styled. But I knew better now. I'd seen the other him, the real him. I scrolled deeper, past the sanitized press releases, into the darker corners of the internet. Anonymous forums, true crime blogs, Reddit threads that got deleted almost as fast as they appeared. The Severino family wasn't just rich. They were powerful. Third-generation syndicate with roots in Sicily, branches spreading across every major city on the eastern seaboard. They controlled ports, construction contracts, unions, politicians. The kind of power that didn't need to announce itself because everyone already knew. And Dante was the head. The youngest Don in family history. Ruthless, strategic, untouchable. One blog post claimed he'd orchestrated a peace treaty between 3 warring families by having dinner with all the bosses, and by dessert 2 of them were dead and the third had sworn loyalty. Another said he'd personally executed a traitor in front of 50 witnesses, and not one of them testified. Rumors, legends, the kind of stories that grew in the dark places of the city. But after last night, I believed every word. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. A car will collect you at 7:30 p.m. Wear something. Appropriate. No greeting. No signature. Just orders. My hands clenched around the phone. Who the hell did he think he was? Summoning me like I was one of his subordinates. I had rights. I had choices. I could. You could what? A cold voice in my head whispered. Refuse? And then what? Wait to see what happens to people who refuse Dante Severino? I threw the phone across the room. It hit the wall with a satisfying crack, but didn't break. Much like my situation, damaged, but still functional. Still trapped. The black Mercedes arrived at exactly 7:30 p.m. I'd spent 3 hours getting ready, which was ridiculous considering I owned approximately 2 outfits that didn't scream, broke waitress. I'd settled on a simple black dress, the one I'd bought for my father's funeral 2 years ago, and hadn't worn since. It felt appropriate somehow. Mourning and uncertainty wrapped in conservative fabric. The driver didn't speak, didn't even look at me, just opened the door with mechanical efficiency, and waited while I slid into leather seats that probably cost more than my rent. We drove through the city as evening fell, past the gentrified neighborhoods and trendy restaurants, past the financial district with its glass towers reaching toward the sky. The buildings got older, more ornate. Old money, the kind of wealth that didn't need to show off because it had been there for generations. The car pulled up to a building that looked like it had been transported from Renaissance Italy. Marble columns, intricate ironwork, windows that glowed with warm golden light. A doorman in a pristine uniform opened the Mercedes before it even fully stopped. Miss Vale, Mr. Severino is expecting you. Of course he was. The lobby was all dark wood and expensive art. My shoes' scuffed flats that had seen better days clicked against marble floors that reflected the chandelier overhead like a mirror. I felt desperately out of place, like a stain on expensive fabric. The elevator was private. It required a key. The doorman inserted it, pressed the button for the penthouse, and stepped back with a slight bow. Top floor, miss. The doors closed. I was alone with my reflection and my racing heart. You can still run, I told myself. Press the emergency stop. Take the stairs. Find a fire exit. But I didn't, because some sick, twisted part of me wanted to see him again. Wanted to know why he'd summoned me. Wanted to understand what last night had meant. The elevator opened directly into the penthouse. I stepped out into a space that defied logic. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the entire city, a glittering expanse of lights and life spread out like offerings. The furnishings were minimal but perfect. Leather, steel, glass. Art that probably belonged in museums hung casually on the walls. And there, silhouetted against the windows, stood Dante Severino. He'd changed from last night. No blood-spattered shirt, no gun. Instead, he wore dark slacks and a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, revealing forearms corded with muscle and marked with scars I hadn't seen before. His hair was slightly damp, like he'd just showered. He held a glass of amber liquid whiskey, probably, and didn't turn around when I entered. You came. His voice carried across the space, low and somehow satisfied. I wondered if you would. You didn't leave me much choice. My voice came out sharper than intended, fear manifesting as anger. There's always a choice, Sasha. Now he turned, and the impact of his full attention hit me like a physical force. Those eyes, God, those eyes. You could have run. Many would have. You didn't. What do you want from me? He smiled then, slow, dangerous, like a wolf that had just spotted particularly interesting prey. He set down his glass and walked toward me with the same predatory grace I'd seen in the restaurant. Each step deliberate, controlled. He stopped 3 feet away, close enough that I could smell his cologne, something dark and expensive. Close enough that I had to tilt my head back to meet his gaze. What do I want? He reached out, and I forced myself not to flinch as his fingers, impossibly gentle, tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. I want to know why a woman who serves tables for tips owns the building where my family just got ambushed. The floor dropped out from under me. What? His expression didn't change. Tesoro Restaurant. The property deed is registered to Sasha Elena Vale. You. So I'll ask again, and this time, I want the truth. His hand moved to my chin, tilting my face up to his. The gentleness gone, replaced by steel. Who are you really? And why are you watching me? My mind went blank. Completely, utterly blank. He knew. But how? I'd been so careful. The property was buried under shell companies and legal structures designed specifically to keep my name hidden. It had taken lawyers and money I barely had, and I can see you calculating, Dante said softly, his thumb now stroking along my jawline in a gesture that felt both tender and threatening, wondering how I found out, wondering what else I know. I jerked away from his touch, my back hitting the elevator door. I'm not watching you. I didn't even know who you were until last night. Liar. The word was gentle, almost affectionate. That made it worse somehow. No one hides ownership of a prime real estate property in my territory without a reason. He moved closer, caging me against the elevator with his body, not touching but there, overwhelming every sense I had. So either you're working for my enemies, or you have secrets worth killing to protect. Which is it? Neither. The word burst out of me, panic and anger mixing into something sharp. I inherited it, okay? From my father. Along with a mountain of debt and legal problems I'm still trying to untangle. I work there because I can't afford not to. And I didn't tell anyone I owned it because the moment people know, they treat you differently. They expect things. I cut myself off, breathing hard, realizing I'd just spilled more truth than I'd intended. Dante studied me for a long moment. His expression hadn't changed, still that mask of controlled intensity, but something flickered in his eyes. Calculation. Curiosity. Maybe belief. Your father, he said finally, stepping back and giving me space to breathe. Elena Vale's husband. I remember him. My heart stopped. You knew my father? Knew of him. He tried to expand his restaurant business about 5 years ago. Needed permits, union cooperation. He came to my father, asked for help. Dante walked back to the windows, hands in his pockets, silhouetted against the city lights. My father refused, said he didn't do business with civilians who wanted to stay clean. Too complicated. I remembered that time. The late-night phone calls. My father's increasingly desperate attempts to save his dream. The way he'd started, drinking more, sleeping less. How he'd aged 10 years and 6 months. He died thinking he was a failure, I said quietly. Heart attack at 52. Left me with 6 restaurants mortgaged to hell, legal bills that never stopped coming, and a mother who checked out emotionally long before he died. Dante turned to look at me, and for the first time, his expression softened. Just slightly, just enough that I saw the man beneath the monster. You sold 5 of the restaurants, kept Tesoro. Why? Because it was his favorite. The first one he opened, the one he actually cared about. I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly cold despite the room's perfect temperature. And because I'm stubborn and stupid and can't let things go. No. Dante crossed back to me, moving with that liquid grace that made me think of big cats stalking prey. You're loyal. Stubborn, yes, but loyal to your father's memory, even when it costs you. He reached out again, slower this time, giving me a chance to pull away. I didn't. His hand cupped my face with surprising gentleness, thumb brushing my cheekbone. That kind of loyalty is rare, Sasha. Especially in my world, it's either weakness. His gaze intensified, searching mine, or it's strength that most people can't comprehend. The air between us felt electric, dangerous. I couldn't breathe properly, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but stare into those dark eyes and wonder what he saw when he looked at me. Which one do you think I am? I whispered, his lips curved. I haven't decided yet. He dropped his hand and stepped back, the moment shattering like glass. He gestured toward the main living area. Hungry? The abrupt shift gave me whiplash. What? It's 8:30. You worked a full shift yesterday before armed men tried to kill us both. I doubt you've eaten properly today. He walked toward the kitchen, because of course a penthouse this size had a full kitchen, and started pulling out ingredients with the confidence of someone who actually knew how to use them. Sit. I'll cook. I stared at him. You're going to cook. You, Dante Severino, Mafia boss. Don, he corrected absently, retrieving a cutting board. And yes, I cook when I need to think. Sit down, Sasha, before you fall down. You're still pale from shock. I should have left. Should have demanded he let me go. Should have done 1,000 things that weren't standing frozen in a crime lord's kitchen while he chopped vegetables with the same precise efficiency he'd used to kill men last night. Instead, I sat on one of the bar stools and watched him work. The men who attacked last night, I said quietly. Will they come back? No. Dante's knife moved in swift practice strokes. The Russo family won't make that mistake again. 2 of Carlo's men died. The others will tell him I could have killed them all but chose not to. That's a message I can reach him anytime I want. I searched for words. That's terrifying. That's business. He looked up, met my eyes. In my world, perception is currency. Fear, respect, loyalty, they're all the same coin, different sides. Last night I bought peace with violence. Today I'm making pasta with a woman who owns a building in my territory and doesn't even realize what that means. What does it mean? He smiled a real smile this time, something warm and almost boyish that transformed his entire face. It means, Sasha Vale, that whether you intended to or not, you've put yourself directly in my world, and now I need to decide what to do about you. Before I could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his expression went cold, not angry, but emptied of all emotion. The Don's mask sliding back into place. I need to take this. He walked toward his office, then paused at the doorway, looking back at me. Don't leave. We're not finished. It wasn't a request. He disappeared into the office, door closing with a soft click. I sat alone in his kitchen, surrounded by expensive silence and the smell of garlic and olive oil, and realized with creeping certainty that I was in far deeper than I'd imagined. Through the office door I heard Dante's voice low, clipped, speaking rapid Italian. And then, clear as crystal, I heard a name that made my blood run cold. Elena. My mother's name. I pressed my hand over my mouth to stifle the gasp. My mother. He was talking about my mother. But that was impossible. She'd been a wreck since my father died, barely functional, medicated, living in a care facility upstate because she couldn't handle being alone. She had nothing to do with this world, nothing to do with men like Dante Severino, except the mortgages on the restaurants, the legal tangles that never seemed to end, the creditors who'd appeared out of nowhere, demanding payment for debts I'd never heard my father mention. The way she'd looked at me at the funeral, her eyes clearer than they'd been in months, and whispered, "Some debts. Can't be paid with money, Sasha. Remember that." I'd thought it was grief, medication. The rambling of a woman who'd lost everything. What if it wasn't? I slid off the bar stool, my heart hammering. I should stay put. Dante had told me not to leave, but I needed to know. Needed to understand what my mother had to do with any of this. The office door was heavy wood, designed for privacy, but it hadn't latched completely. Through the gap, I could see Dante standing at his desk, phone pressed to his ear, his free hand braced against the dark wood. Every line of his body radiated tension. "I don't care what she claims," he said, his voice cutting. "Elena Vale has been trying to leverage her connection to us for 2 years. The answer is still no." Silence as someone responded. "Because her husband refused to play by our rules, and she thinks grief gives her a pass." "It doesn't." Another pause. "The daughter is a different matter." My breath caught. "Yes, I'm aware of the complications. I'm handling it." His tone shifted softer, but somehow more dangerous. Sasha is either a player who's been running a very long game, or she's genuinely innocent. Either way, she's valuable. Valuable. The word hung in the air like a noose. "No, Marco. She stays close until I know which." Dante turned, and I jerked back from the door, my pulse roaring in my ears. "I'll contact the facility directly. If Elena wants to talk, she can do it through me, not her daughter. Are we clear?" I retreated to the kitchen, my mind spinning. My mother had been in contact with them, with the Severinos, for 2 years since right after my father died, leveraging a connection. What connection? What had my father gotten involved in that I didn't know about? The office door opened. Dante emerged, his expression carefully neutral, but his eyes found me immediately, sharp, assessing. "You heard." It wasn't a question. I could have lied. Should have lied. But I was so tired of lies, my mother's, my father's, everyone's. Yes. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly, like I'd passed some kind of test. Good. Honesty. That's progress. Progress toward what? My voice came out harder than I intended. You're talking about me like I'm a chess piece. Valuable. Complications. What the hell is going on, Dante? That's what I'm trying to figure out. He moved past me into the kitchen, turning off the burner where water had been boiling. Such a mundane action in the middle of everything falling apart. Your mother has been calling my people for 2 years, claiming your father had an arrangement with my family, demanding we honor it. What kind of arrangement? Protection. Territory rights. The usual things civilians think they can negotiate when they're desperate. He leaned against the counter, arms crossed. Your father came to mine once. That much is true. But he walked away when he understood the price. Some men do. They choose to fail on their own terms rather than succeed under ours. And you think he didn't walk away? The implication was clear in his tone. You think my father was working with your family? I think your father was a desperate man who loved his daughter very much. Dante's gaze softened, just slightly. And desperate men make complicated choices. Your mother claims he agreed to certain terms before he died, terms that included you. The room tilted. Included me how? She won't say. Claims she'll only discuss it with leadership. With me. He pushed off the counter, closing the distance between us with predatory grace. But here's what I know, Sasha. Your father died suddenly. Heart attack. No warning. Except he'd passed a physical the week before, clean bill of health. The implication hit me like a fist. No, you're not suggesting... I'm not suggesting anything. I'm telling you what my instincts say. His hand came up, fingers gentle as they traced the line of my jaw. You're caught in something, Bella. Something that started before last night. Before you walked into that restaurant. And until I know what, I can't let you go. Can't or won't. His smile was sharp. Does it matter? Yes. No. I didn't know anymore. Everything I'd thought I understood about my life, my family, was unraveling like cheap thread. I need to talk to her, I said. My mother. Whatever she knows, whatever my father did, I deserve to know the truth. No. The word was absolute. You go nowhere near her until I understand what game she's playing. For all I know, she's using you as leverage, or bait, or she's my mother and she's scared and alone and maybe she actually needs my help. The words burst out of me, loud and sharp. I shoved at his chest, surprised when he actually moved back. You don't get to control this. You don't get to decide who I see or what I know. I do when your safety is at stake. His voice had gone cold again, the dawn replacing the man. You don't understand how this works, Sasha. The moment you walked into my world, you became a target. Your mother made sure of that when she started making demands and dropping your name to anyone who'd listen. Then explain it to me. Stop treating me like I'm fragile or stupid or... You're not fragile. He moved fast, backing me against the counter, his body caging mine. Not threatening, protective, possessive. You're brave and stubborn and too honest for your own good. That's what makes you dangerous, Bella. In my world, people like you don't survive. Then why do you care? I looked up at him, searching his face for answers. If I'm such a liability, why not just let me go? Wash your hands of whatever mess my parents created? His jaw tightened. Something flickered in his eyes, something raw and unguarded for just a second before he locked it down. Because, he said quietly, his thumb brushing my lower lip in a gesture that made my breath catch. I can't. Before I could ask what he meant, his phone buzzed again. He pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and his entire body went rigid. What is it? He looked at me, and for the first time since I'd met him, I saw genuine concern on his face. Your apartment building is on fire. The night sky glowed orange. I pressed my face against the Mercedes window, watching my entire life go up in flames. Fire trucks surrounded the building, their lights strobing red and blue against the smoke-dark sky. Water arced from hoses, but the top 3 floors, including mine, were already gone. Just blackened skeleton and hungry flames consuming everything I owned. Everything I was. Sasha. Dante's hand closed over mine where I'd pressed it against the glass. Look at me. I couldn't. If I looked away, if I acknowledged this was real, then I'd have to accept that someone had just erased my existence. Because this wasn't an accident. We both knew it. Was anyone hurt? My voice came out hollow. No casualties. The fire started on your floor. Spread fast. Too fast. His grip tightened. Professional accelerant. Time to send a message, not kill civilians. What message? I finally turned to face him. His jaw was tight, eyes hard as flint. What message needs my apartment to burn? That you're connected to me now. That I've claimed you. He released my hand, pulling out his phone. And that whoever is behind this knows it bothers me. Bothers. Such a mild word for the violence radiating off him. For the way his knuckles had gone white around his phone. For the tone in his voice when he started making calls, rapid Italian, clipped orders, names I didn't recognize. A realization cut through my shock. Dante Severino was angry, not the cold, controlled anger from the restaurant. This was personal. Burning. Did you keep anything valuable there? He asked once he'd finished his calls. Documents, heirlooms, anything that can't be replaced? I almost laughed. Valuable. I had photos. My father's watch that stopped working 3 years ago. A quilt my grandmother made. Books. My voice cracked. God. My books. First editions my father collected. I'll replace them. You can't replace memories, I whispered. No. His hand came up, tucking hair behind my ear with unexpected tenderness. But I can make sure whoever did this regrets being born. The matter-of-fact way he said it should have terrified me. Instead, I felt something else. Something dark and hot that I didn't want to examine. Take me there. I reached for the door handle. I need to see it up close. Need to... No. He caught my wrist. Not until my men sweep it. Not until I know it's safe. Safe? My life just burned, Dante. There is no safe anymore. Exactly. He pulled me closer, his other hand cupping my face, forcing me to meet his eyes. You have no apartment, no possessions, nowhere to hide, which means you stay with me, where I can protect you, where no one can touch you without going through me first. You can't just, I can, I am, not cruel, not apologetic, just absolute certainty. This is how it works, Sasha. You're mine to protect now. Fight it if you want. It won't change anything. Mine. The word should have made me argue. Should have made me demand he let me go. Instead, it settled over me like inevitability. Like something I'd been waiting for without knowing. For how long? I asked quietly. His thumb stroked my cheekbone. Until the danger passes. Or... He paused. Something shifting in his expression. Until you stop being afraid of what that means. Before I could respond, one of his men appeared at the window. Marco, the one with the scarred knuckles. Dante lowered the glass. Boss, we found the ignition point. Your floor. Her bedroom. Crude but effective. Marco's eyes flicked to me, something like sympathy in them. Also found this on her door. He held up a phone, evidence-bagged. Even through the plastic, I could see the message on the screen. She's prettier when she burns. My stomach turned over. Dante took the bag, his expression going flat, emptier than I'd ever seen it. Who? I whispered. Carlo Russo. Dante's voice had gone soft, deadly soft, answering last night's message with one of his own, telling me he can reach what I protect. I'm not, I started, but he cut me off with a look. You are now. He handed the phone back to Marco. Get me everything. Cameras, witnesses, which of his men he used. I want names by morning. Already on it, boss. Marco hesitated. Your father called. Wants a meeting. Says this is escalating beyond. Tell him I'll handle it. He insists. Marco. One word. That was all it took. Marco nodded and disappeared into the night. Dante looked back at me, and some of the emptiness faded from his eyes. You're exhausted, scared, angry. You need rest. I need answers. I need to understand why this is happening. Why my mother is involved. Why people are trying to kill me because of secrets I don't even know. Tomorrow. He rapped on the divider, and the Mercedes pulled away from the burning building. Away from my old life. Tonight, you rest. Tomorrow, we go see your mother. Together, and we get those answers. You said I couldn't see her. I changed my mind. He shifted closer, his presence overwhelming in the confined space. You were right. You deserve the truth. All of it, even if it destroys what you thought you knew. I studied his face in the darkness, trying to understand him. This man who killed without hesitation but cooked pasta in his kitchen, who commanded empires but touched me like I was something precious, who said I was his to protect with the same certainty other men said good morning. Why? I asked. Why do you care what happens to me? You barely know me. His hand found mine in the darkness, fingers lacing through mine with deliberate intimacy. When he spoke, his voice was rough, raw in a way I hadn't heard before. Because when those lights went out in the restaurant, my first instinct wasn't survival. It was making sure you lived. He brought my hand to his lips, pressed a kiss to my knuckles that felt like a brand. Because I've killed hundreds of men without losing sleep. But the thought of you burning in that building made me want to raze this entire city to the ground. My breath caught. Because Sasha Vale, whether I wanted to or not, whether it makes any sense or not, I've already decided you're mine. And I protect what's mine. Always. The Mercedes turned into an underground garage, concrete and shadows and security that could probably stop a small army. The door opened. Dante stepped out, then turned back to me, hand extended. An invitation, a claim, a choice that wasn't really a choice at all. I took his hand and let him lead me into the darkness. The care facility sat on a hill overlooking the Hudson River, all manicured lawns and expensive tranquility. The kind of place that cost more per month than most people made in a year. I'd been paying for my mother's stay by selling off everything my father left behind, piece by piece, until there was nothing left but tesoro and crushing debt. I'd always wondered how I'd managed to keep her here when the money ran out 6 months ago. Now, staring at the pristine white building with Dante beside me, I was starting to understand. This facility has connections to your family, doesn't it? I asked quietly. Yes. He didn't elaborate. Didn't need to. His family owned half the city, of course. They had connections to an upscale care facility. Of course my mother's bills had been mysteriously covered. Of course there was a price I hadn't known I was paying. How long have you been keeping her here? Since the money stopped. Since she started calling us, making claims about arrangements and debts. Dante's hand rested on the small of my back as we walked toward the entrance. Possessive. Protective. I wanted leverage if she was lying. I wanted her safe if she was telling the truth. Either way, I needed her accessible. You manipulated this entire situation. I stopped walking, looking up at him. You controlled when I'd find out. When I'd come here. Yes. No apology in his tone. That's what I do, Sasha. I manipulate variables until I control the outcome. It's how I've survived this long. And me? Am I just another variable? His jaw tightened. For a long moment he didn't answer. Then, you were supposed to be. Were. The word hung between us like confession. My mother looked smaller than I remembered. She sat in her room's armchair, staring out the window at the river, her once vibrant auburn hair now streaked with gray. She'd always been beautiful. Sharp cheekbones, elegant features, the kind of woman who turned heads. But grief had hollowed her out, left her a shadow wrapped in a cardigan. Elena. Dante spoke first, his voice formal. Cold. We need to talk about your late husband's debts. She turned slowly, and her eyes still sharp. Still. Calculating moved from Dante to me. Something flickered across her face. Not surprise. Relief, maybe. Or resignation. Sasha. Her voice was steadier than I expected. Clearer. You brought him here. Good. That saves time. Mom, what's going on? I moved forward, kneeling beside her chair. Dante says you've been calling his family, making claims about Dad, about arrangements I don't know about. What arrangements? She reached out, her thin hand cupping my cheek with surprising strength. You look so much like him. Your father. Same stubborn eyes. Same refusal to see danger until it's too late. Elena. Dante's voice cut through the moment. Answer her question. My mother's gaze moved to him, and something passed between them. Recognition. Maybe. Respect. Or just the acknowledgement of power. Your father was dying, she said finally, looking back at me. Not the heart attack. Before that. 6 months before. Cancer. Pancreatic. Stage 4. He had maybe a year, the doctor said. Maybe less. The room tilted. What? No. He never said. Because he didn't want you to know. Didn't want you to watch him waste away. Tears gathered in her eyes but didn't fall. He wanted to leave you something. Security. A future. But the restaurants were failing. The debts were crushing us. So he made a deal. Dante moved closer, his presence a shadow at my back. What deal? Protection. Territory rights for Tesoro. Guaranteed profits through the family's network. She took a shaky breath. In exchange, when Sasha turned 25, she would. She couldn't finish. But I could. The pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity. She would what, Mom? Be sold? Married off? What did Dad promise? An alliance. The word came from Dante, cold and precise. Your father offered you as a bride to cement business relations. Standard practice in our world. Barbaric, perhaps, but effective. I stood up so fast the chair scraped against the floor. He wouldn't. Dad wouldn't do. That. He was dying, Sasha. My mother's composure cracked. He was desperate. He loved you so much he couldn't see straight. The Severinos offered him a way to save everything, the restaurants, our home, your future. All he had to do was promise that in 5 years, when you came of age, you'd enter the family through marriage. To who? My voice came out as a whisper. Silence. Dante moved around me, standing directly in my line of sight. When he spoke, his voice was carefully neutral. To me. Everything stopped. The room. My heartbeat. The world. You. I stared at him. This whole time. Since the restaurant. Since you rescued me. Since I didn't know. The words came sharp, almost angry. My father negotiated that deal. I was in Europe, handling territory disputes. When I returned, your father was already dead. The contract void because he'd died before you turned 25. But my mother tried to resurrect it, claimed the deal should be honored regardless. That, your father's death didn't negate the agreement. Dante's hands clenched at his sides. I refused, repeatedly. I don't honor contracts with the dead, and I sure as hell don't force women into marriages they didn't choose. Then why didn't you tell me? I felt tears burning behind my eyes but refused to let them fall. Why the games? The protection? The claiming? Because... He moved closer, his intensity almost overwhelming. Because I needed to know if you were part of this. If you'd known all along and were playing me. If this was some elaborate scheme to trap me into honoring your father's deal. And now? Now that you know I didn't know. That I'm just another victim of everyone's secrets and manipulations. What now, Dante? He reached for me, but I stepped back. The hurt that flashed across his face was almost worth the betrayal burning through my chest. Now, he said quietly, we end this. I'll pay off Tesoro's debts. Set you up somewhere safe, somewhere Russo can't reach you. You walk away clean, free, like none of this ever happened. Just like that. Just like that. I looked at my mother, crying silently in her chair. At Dante, standing rigid with control that was clearly costing him. At the life I'd thought I had, revealed as fiction built on lies and desperate bargains. And if I don't want to walk away? The words came out before I could stop them. Dante's eyes snapped to mine. What? You said the contract is void, that you won't force me. But what if... I took a shaking breath. What if I chose it anyway? What if I honored my father's bargain? Not because I have to, but because I want to. Sasha, you don't know what you're saying. Don't I? I moved closer, closing the distance he'd created. You've shown me your world, Dante. The violence, the control, the danger. And yes, it terrifies me. But you know what terrifies me more? Walking away and spending the rest of my life wondering what if. What if I'd been brave enough to choose the monster, instead of running from him? His hands came up, framing my face with a gentleness that contradicted everything he was. I'm not a fairy tale, Bella. I won't transform into a prince. This world, my world, it destroys beautiful things. It would destroy you. Maybe. I pressed my hand over his heart, feeling it thunder beneath my palm. Or maybe I'm stronger than you think. Strong enough to stand beside you. Strong enough to be yours by choice, not contract. You don't know what you're asking for. Then show me. I looked up at him, letting him see everything I felt, the fear, the desire, the insane certainty that this was right even when everything said it was wrong. Show me your world, Dante. All of it. The beautiful and the terrible. And then let me decide if I'm brave enough to stay. For a long moment, he just stared at me. Then, slowly, he lowered his forehead to mine, his breath shaking. You're going to ruin me, he whispered. Probably. I whispered back. And then he kissed me. The kiss was nothing like I'd imagined. Not gentle, not tentative. It was claiming, consuming, a declaration of ownership that I should have resisted but instead melted into. His hands tangled in my hair, tilting my head back to deepen the kiss, and I gripped his shoulders like he was the only solid thing in a world that had turned liquid and unstable. When he finally pulled back, we were both breathing hard. His eyes had gone almost black, pupils blown wide with desire and something more dangerous. Something possessive that made my stomach flip. "Last chance," he said roughly. "Walk away now, Sasha, before this goes too far." Before I kissed him again. Softer this time, but no less certain. When I broke away, I pressed my lips to his ear and whispered, "Too late." A shudder ran through him. His arms came around me, crushing me against his chest, and for a moment we just stood there, two people on the edge of a cliff, about to jump together. Ahem. We broke apart. My mother was watching us with an expression I couldn't read, relief, worry, and something almost like approval mixed together. "If you're going to do this," she said quietly, "you need to understand what you're agreeing to. Dante, tell her everything." The drive back to the city was silent. Dante held my hand, his thumb tracing absent patterns on my palm, but his mind was clearly elsewhere. Planning, calculating, preparing me for whatever came next. We didn't go back to his penthouse. Instead, the Mercedes descended into a different underground garage, older, darker, with security that made the previous one look casual. Armed guards, biometric scanners, doors that looked like they could survive nuclear war. "Where are we?" I asked as Dante helped me out of the car. "The heart of it all," he said. "If you want to see my world, Bella, this is where it beats." He led me through corridors that felt ancient exposed brick, low lighting, the smell of old stone and older money. We passed men in suits who nodded respectfully, their eyes sliding over me with carefully neutral expressions, assessing, judging whether I belonged. We stopped in front of a massive oak door. Dante paused, his hand on the handle, and looked at me with unexpected vulnerability. "Last chance," he said again. "Once you see this, you can't unsee it. You can't go back to your life before. You'll know too much. Be too much. There's no middle ground with this world, Sasha. You're either in or you're dead." "Then I guess I'm in," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. He searched my eyes for another moment, then nodded and pushed open the door. The room beyond looked like something from another century. A massive table dominated the center, dark wood polished to a mirror shine. Around it sat 12 men in various stages of wealth and danger, expensive suits, visible scars, eyes that had seen violence and inflicted it. Every single one of them turned to look at me. "Gentlemen," Dante said calmly, his hand settling on my lower back. "This is Sasha Vale, Elena's daughter. As of today, she's under my personal protection. Anyone who touches her answers to me." The silence that followed was deafening. Then, an older man at the head of the table, silver-haired, with eyes like chips of ice, leaned back in his chair and studied me. "This is unexpected, Figlio." His voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "Dante's father. Had to be. We discussed keeping her at a distance, not bringing her into the heart of our operations. Plans change," Dante said evenly. "Russo made his move, burned her apartment, sent threats. She's a target now whether we want her to be or not. So you bring her here?" Another man younger, with a scar bisecting his eyebrow, slammed his hand on the table. "She could be a plant, a spy. Russo could be using her to enough, Luca." Dante's voice went cold. "She's here because I say she's here. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me personally." The threat was clear. The room went silent again. Dante's father studied me for a long, uncomfortable moment. Then, slowly, he smiled. "She has your mother's eyes, Elena's daughter. Francesca's fire." He stood, moving around the table with the same predatory grace I'd seen in his son. "Tell me, child, do you know what you're agreeing to? The life you're choosing?" "No," I admitted, "but I'm willing to learn. Honest." He glanced at Dante. "I see why you're drawn to her. Honesty is rare in our world." He stopped in front of me, close enough that I had to tilt my head back to meet his gaze. "But honesty without strength is just another weakness. Can you be strong, Sasha Vale? Strong enough to stand beside my son?" To bear the weight of this family's name and all the blood it's built on? I don't know, I said quietly, but I'm willing to try. Something shifted in his expression. Not warmth, exactly, but acknowledgement. He turned to Dante. You've chosen. So, be it. But if she fails, if she breaks, if she betrays us, she won't, Dante said with absolute certainty. She's standing right here, I interjected, surprised by my own boldness. And she can speak for herself. Several men at the table chuckled. Dante's father's lips twitched. Fire indeed. Very well. Welcome to the family, Sasha. May you survive it. He returned to his seat. The meeting continued discussions of territories, shipments, disputes I only half understood, but I felt the weight of it all. The power, the danger, the absolute certainty that these men controlled more than I'd ever imagined. And through it all, Dante's hand never left my back, anchoring me, claiming me, promising without words that whatever came next, we'd face it together. The meeting ended near midnight. As men filed out, some nodded to me, others ignored me completely, but all of them acknowledged that I'd crossed a line tonight. That I was part of this now, whether I fully understood what this meant or not. When the room was empty except for us, Dante finally relaxed, his shoulders dropping slightly. He turned to me, searching my face. You did well, he said softly. Better than I expected. They respect strength, and you showed them yours. I was terrified the entire time. I know. He tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. But you didn't let them see it. That's what matters. What happens now? I asked. His expression darkened. Now, we deal with Russo. He's made his move. Time to make mine. What does that mean? It means tomorrow. You'll see exactly what I am, Sasha. He cupped my face, his touch gentle despite the violence promised in his words. You'll see the monster that lives under the skin. And then you'll decide if you can still stand beside me when the blood is fresh and the screams haven't faded. My heart hammered in my chest, but I didn't look away, didn't flinch. Show me, I whispered. Show me everything. His eyes went dark, hungry. Careful what you wish for, Bella. He kissed me then, hard, possessive, a promise of violence and passion twisted together. When he pulled back, his smile was sharp enough to cut. Tomorrow, he breathed against my lips. Tomorrow, you become truly mine. And despite everything, the fear, the uncertainty, the danger, I couldn't wait. I woke to the sound of rain against bulletproof glass. Dante's penthouse bedroom was massive floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Furniture that probably cost more than my destroyed apartment building, and sheets, with a thread count that felt like silk against my skin. I'd slept in one of his shirts, drowning in fabric that smelled like him cedar and smoke, and something uniquely Dante. He wasn't in bed. I found him in his office, dressed in black from head to toe, checking a weapon with the casual efficiency of someone who'd done it 1,000 times. In the gray morning light, he looked less like a businessman and more like what he truly was. A predator, preparing for the hunt. You're awake, he said without looking up. There's coffee in the kitchen. Breakfast if you want it. This won't take long. What won't take long? What won't take long? I moved into the room, my bare feet silent on the hardwood. Dante, what are you doing? What needs to be done? He finally looked up, and his eyes were empty. Cold. The Don's mask firmly in place. Russo burned your apartment, threatened you. That requires a response. What kind of response? The permanent kind. My stomach dropped. You're going to kill him. Yes. No hesitation. No remorse. Just cold fact. He touched what's mine. There's only one answer for that, and you want me to watch. It wasn't a question. This was the test. The moment he'd warned me about. See the monster and decide if I could live with it. No. He set down the gun and crossed to me, his hands settling on my shoulders. I want you safe here while I handle this. But if you insist on understanding my world, if you want to truly know what you're choosing, his jaw tightened, then yes, come with me. See what I am when the mask comes off. I should have said no. Should have taken the out he was offering. Should have stayed in the safety of his penthouse with my coffee and my illusions intact. I'm coming with you, I said instead. Something flickered in his eyes. Pride, maybe. Or resignation. Then get dressed. We leave in 20 minutes. The warehouse was exactly what I'd expected, abandoned, isolated, the kind of place where screams wouldn't carry. 3 black SUVs were already parked outside. Men in tactical gear moved with practiced efficiency, checking weapons, establishing perimeters. I'd changed into jeans and a dark sweater. Practical clothes. Like that would somehow make this normal. Make me normal for agreeing to witness whatever was about to happen. Dante kept me close as we entered the warehouse. His hand rested on my lower back, protective, possessive, grounding. Inside, the space had been cleared, except for a single chair in the center, illuminated by harsh overhead lights. And in that chair, bound and bleeding, sat Carlo Russo. He looked up as we approached, his face a mess of bruises and cuts. But his eyes were still defiant, still cruel. Severino. He spat blood onto the concrete floor. Come to gloat? No. Dante's voice was perfectly calm. Come to teach you what happens when you touch my property. Property. Carlo laughed, the sound wet and broken. That what you're calling her? Your father's cast-off? The civilian bride you were too proud to claim? Dante didn't respond, didn't react. He just removed his jacket, handed it to one of his men, and rolled up his sleeves with methodical precision. Last night, he said conversationally, you burned an apartment building, targeted a woman under my protection, sent threats that suggested violence. Tell me, Carlo, did you think that would intimidate me? Make me back down? I thought it would remind you that you're not untouchable, that we can reach your weaknesses anytime we want. Weaknesses. Dante picked up something from a nearby table, a knife, long and wickedly sharp. Interesting word choice. He moved fast. The blade flashed. Carlo screamed. I wanted to look away. Wanted to close my eyes, cover my ears, run from the warehouse and never stop running. But I forced myself to watch, to see what Dante became when the veneer of civilization stripped away. He was efficient, precise, every cut calculated for maximum pain but minimum permanent damage, at least at first. He asked questions in that same conversational tone. Who ordered the hit? Who else was involved? What other moves they'd planned? Carlo lasted longer than I expected. 20 minutes of interrogation before he started breaking, started giving up names and locations and secrets between sobs and screams. Through it all, Dante's expression never changed, never showed rage or satisfaction or even basic emotion. He was a machine, a force of nature dressed in blood-spattered black. When Carlo finally had nothing left to give, Dante set down the knife and looked at me, really looked at me, searching my face for disgust, for horror, for the rejection he clearly expected. This is who I am, Sasha, he said quietly. This is what I do to protect what's mine. Still think you can stand beside me? I was trembling. My stomach was churning, but I held his gaze and said, yes. Something cracked in his carefully controlled expression. Relief. Disbelief. Something that looked almost like hope. He turned back to Carlo. Any last words? Carlo lifted his head with the last of his strength. Your father was right about you. You're too soft. Keeping her alive just proves it. One day, she'll be your... The gunshot cut him off. Carlo slumped forward, dead before he finished the threat. Dante lowered his weapon, turned to his men. Clean this up. Send the body to the Russo family with my compliments. Let them know. This is finished, or the next one will be their dawn. Orders given. He walked toward me, each step deliberate, giving me time to run, to reject him, to do what any sane person would do. I didn't move. When he reached me, blood on his hands and death in his wake, he cupped my face with surprising gentleness. You're shaking. I know. Are you afraid of me? I thought about that. Really thought about it. Was I afraid? Yes. Terrified, actually. But not of him. Of what I felt watching him, seeing him in his element, understanding the full scope of the power he wielded. No, I said finally. I'm afraid of how much I'm not afraid, of how right this feels when it should feel wrong. His thumb brushed my cheekbone. That makes 2 of us. He kissed me then soft, reverent, like I was something precious instead of the witness to his violence. And maybe that was the most dangerous thing of all, that he could separate the 2 so completely. Could be monster and man in the same breath. Take me home, I whispered against his lips. My home, he corrected, pulling me closer. You don't have another one anymore. I know. I pressed my face against his chest, breathing him in smoke and copper and the promise of violence. I know. We left the warehouse together, left Carlo's body in the blood and the brutality behind. But I carried the knowledge with me now, heavy as stone. I'd chosen this, chosen him, chosen a life where love and death walked hand in hand, and I didn't regret it. Not yet. The penthouse was dark when we returned. Dante led me through the shadows, neither of us turning on lights, moving by instinct and the city's glow filtering through the windows. We didn't speak, didn't need to. Everything that mattered had been said in that warehouse, in the silence of the drive home, in the way his hand never left mine. He stopped in his bedroom doorway, turning to face me with an intensity that stole my breath. "Last chance," he said for the third time in 2 days. "I can still set you up somewhere safe. New identity, new life. You could walk away clean, pretend none of this happened." No, the word came out firm, certain. I made my choice. I'm staying. Even knowing what I am, what I'll do, the blood that's already on my hands and the blood that's still to come. Especially knowing that. I moved closer, closing the final distance between us. I'm done running from danger, Dante. Done hiding from the truth. If I'm going to burn, I want it to be for something real, for someone real. His jaw tightened. I'll ruin you. Promise? The question broke something in him. Whatever control he'd been maintaining shattered like glass. He pulled me against him, his mouth crashing onto mine with desperate hunger. This kiss was different from the others, not claiming, not possessive. Surrendering. Like I'd conquered something in him he'd thought was unconquerable. We moved in a tangle of grasping hands and shed clothing. His shirt, my sweater, barriers, dissolving until skin met skin and nothing existed but heat and need and the electric pull that had been building since the moment we met. He lifted me, my legs wrapping around his waist as he carried me to the bed. The city lights painted us in shadow and gold, creating an intimacy that felt sacred despite everything we were. "Tell me you want this." He breathed against my throat. "Tell me you choose this. Choose me. I choose you," I whispered. "All of you. The man and the monster. The darkness and the light. I choose all of it." His response was a shudder that ran through his entire body. When he finally made love to me, it was with a reverence that contradicted everything he was supposed to be. Gentle despite his capacity for violence. Tender despite his ruthlessness. Like I was something holy he'd found in the darkness and refused to corrupt. But corruption, I was learning, was relative. Maybe choosing him was its own kind of corruption. Or maybe it was the first honest thing I'd done in years, acknowledging the darkness inside myself that recognized and craved the darkness in him. After, we lay tangled in expensive sheets, my head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat slow from frantic to steady. His fingers traced patterns on my bare shoulder, idle, soothing, possessive. "My father will want a formal announcement," he said quietly. "Once word spreads that you're staying, that you're mine, there'll be expectations, traditions, a wedding probably. Though it won't be anything like what you imagined as a little girl." "I never imagined a wedding," I admitted. After watching my parents' marriage crumble, I swore I'd never. I cut myself off, the irony too sharp to voice. Never marry a man involved in organized crime? His chest rumbled with dark humor. Yet here you are, in bed with a Mafia don, discussing wedding traditions. "Here I am," I agreed. "Apparently I have terrible judgment. The worst." He tilted my chin up, forcing me to meet his eyes. "But for what it's worth, Sasha, I'll try to be worth it. Worth your terrible judgment and worse choices. I can't promise to be good, that ship sailed long ago. But I can promise to be yours. Completely. Absolutely. Until death or betrayal. Whichever comes first." "Romantic," I said dryly. "I'm a realist." His expression softened. "But I'm also a man who just found something I didn't know I needed. And I protect what I need, Bella. With everything I have." A phone buzzed his, on the nightstand. He reached for it, frowned at the screen, then showed it to me. A message from Marco. "Russo family accepted your terms. Truce confirmed. Boss wants to see you both tomorrow, 10 a.m. Says to bring the girl." The girl. As if I didn't have a name. As if I was just another acquisition in the Severino empire. "He's going to test you," Dante warned. "My father. He'll want to make sure you're strong enough for this life. That you won't break when things get ugly." "Things aren't already ugly?" His smile was sharp. "This was just the introduction, Bella. Wait until you see what really ugly looks like." I should have been terrified. Should have taken this moment to reconsider. to grab my metaphorical life raft and paddle toward sanity. Instead, I settled deeper into his arms and said, "Then I guess I'll see it together with you." Epilogue. 6 months later, I stood in front of a mirror in a wedding dress that cost more than my old apartment building. It wasn't white. I'd insisted on deep burgundy, the color of wine and blood and everything this life represented. The dress hugged every curve, elegant and dangerous, much like the man I was about to marry. Elena had come. My mother, sober for the first time in years, stood behind me with tears streaming down her face. "Your father would have been so proud," she whispered. "That I'm marrying a criminal?" I asked, not unkindly. "That you're strong enough to choose your own path, even if it's not the one he imagined for you." Through the door, I could hear music starting, could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes waiting to see the woman who'd captured Dante Severino's heart or whatever passed for a heart in a man like him. The door opened. Marco stood there, surprisingly gentle. "Ready, Miss Vale? It's Mrs. Severino now." Dante's voice came from somewhere down the hall. "Or it will be in about 10 minutes. Stop stalling, Bella. I've been patient long enough." I smiled despite myself. Patient. The man who'd claimed me, protected me, killed for me, and shown me a world most people didn't even know existed. Patient was not the word I'd use. But loved? Protected? Cherished in the violent, possessive way of dangerous men? Yes. Absolutely yes. I took a breath, squared my shoulders, and walked toward my future. Toward the man waiting at the end of an aisle lined with criminals and killers and the most powerful family on the East Coast. Toward a life that would never be safe or simple or anything close to normal. And I'd never been more certain of anything in my life. Dante stood at the altar in a black suit that made him look like the devil himself, dark, dangerous, and impossibly beautiful. When his eyes found mine, everything else faded. The crowd, the music, the fear that still lived somewhere in my chest. All that existed was him, and me, and the choice we'd made to burn together. I reached the altar. He took my hand, his thumb brushing over my knuckles in a gesture I'd come to know as his possessive, protective, perfect. "You came," he murmured. "Did you doubt?" "Every second." His smile was soft, vulnerable in a way he only ever showed me. Until now. The ceremony was short, traditional vows mixed with modifications that made some of the older attendees shift uncomfortably. But when Dante slid the ring onto my finger, a blood ruby surrounded by diamonds, and I did the same for him, the pact was sealed. "You may kiss your bride," the officiant said. Dante didn't wait for permission. He pulled me against him and claimed my mouth with a kiss that was absolutely inappropriate for a church, for an audience, for anything resembling civilized society. I kissed him back just as fiercely. Let everyone see exactly what we were to each other. When we finally broke apart, he pressed his forehead to mine and whispered words only I could hear. "Mine. Forever. No going back. No going back," I agreed. And as we turned to face a future built on blood and devotion, on darkness and dangerous love, I knew one absolute truth. I'd chosen the monster, and I'd never been happier.